Thank you. Please be seated. My name is Diana Howard. I am the chair of the Virginia Beach Tea Party, and I'd like to welcome you all here tonight. We're going to start off with our guest speaker, after which we have several candidates that are here tonight that would like to address you. Okay, so tonight we have Second Amendment attorney Tim Anderson. He's the owner of Anderson and Associates. He graduated from University of Law in 1999. They specialize in bankruptcy, criminal defense, aviation law, wills, and some family law. He sits on the board of directors for the Tidewater Youth Service Foundation, Tidewater Bankruptcy Bar, and is a den leader for Cub Scouts Den 7 Impact 364. You might have seen him speaking on the Second Amendment issue at City Council and also over at School Board. And he's got a Facebook page on Engage Your Government. Can I have a nice round of applause for Tim Anderson?
Thank you.
You are so welcome. I don't know if this is going to work.
I'm probably not going to use the microphone because I'm a loudmouth to begin with, but I bought this cool mug back there, guys, for the Nemo Women's Club. The Don't Tread on Me, all right? So it matches my license plate, which is great. So now I have something for that. Well, Second Amendment, interesting stuff, right? A lot to talk about. How many people follow me on? All right, good. All right. So since November, I've been doing videos about what's happening in Richmond. And what I've been trying to do is break down the bills so that we all can understand what they mean. And then we can engage the patrons and our elected representatives on what we like about them, what we don't like about them, feedback that we can have, and so forth. And as you probably know, in November when the Democrats won, there was a lot of aggressive pre-filed bills. And so it was going to be a very interesting year because we're in a position in the General Assembly where the Democrats don't need any votes from the Republicans to get everything through. All right, so there's 140 people in the General Assembly, 100 delegates, 40 senators. There's enough on the House of Delegates for a simple majority and enough in the Senate for a simple majority. So when we started seeing the aggressive bills, and we have Governor Northam who wants these bills, it was very scary. So we saw the Second Amendment sanctuaries popping up here and all over the place. And primarily what that was in response to was Senate Bill 16. Probably all of you have heard of that, or you've heard something about Senate Bill 16. And Senate Bill 16 is generally termed the assault weapons ban by the Democrats. And so that was purported by a guy named Dick Saslaw. He's a Democrat senator out of Northern Virginia, Falls Church area. So basically what it was going to do is it would propose to make felons out of a lot of people that own certain types of firearms, semi-automatic rifles, and if you had suppressors, there's just a variety of different people that they would make felons out of. So then you started seeing these Second Amendment sanctuaries start popping up all over the place because people were very concerned. So as time went on, in November, Governor Northam started using the word confiscation publicly and openly. Publicly, it said he was actually directing his cabinet to start looking at firearm confiscation. Then the Second Amendment sanctuaries are really starting to get into the swing of things. More and more counties are coming on board. Bigger places are coming on board. Chesapeake's really the first major city in Virginia to come on board. And it's just starting to grow and grow. And as that's happening, Congressman McEachin from Chesapeake and Richmond, who's kind of has this weird gerrymandered district, said that they should employ the National Guard. The governor should employ the National Guard to enforce gun laws. And that was really starting, the temperature's now boiling at this point between lawful gun owners and the Richmond Democrats. So the session comes in, And right before the session comes in, I started a recall petition against Dick Saslaw up in Fairfax. Now, a recall petition basically works where you have to get about 10% of the people that voted for in the general election. They have to do that. You have to get 10% of those signatures, and then you have to have cause, and you have to file it in a court, and a judge decides if they're going to remove that petition, that officer. So we're starting to build that up. The Libertarian Party of Virginia actually took that over from me, and they've been up working on signatures. Now, in Saslaw's district, which is the 35th district, it is super Democrat, and super Democrat, like 90% Democrat. So it's been very difficult to get people to sign, even 10% of the population to sign that petition. So we then, but we're working on it. So literally as soon as the first day of the Senate convenes, Dick Saslaw withdraws Senate Bill 16. Like, well, that's interesting, right? Because, there was really no motivation for him to withdraw Senate Bill 16, except the fact that, we were working on a recall against him. And we had cause for recall. And so that kind of breathed life into actually something that was meaningful for the Second Amendment community, that there is a balance of power still left for the citizenry to complain. So kind of start fast forwarding the House of Delegates. So the General Assembly works like this: 60 days in session. Okay, starts at the beginning of January, goes till right around St. Patrick's Day. All right. Right now, this is the last week for both chambers to be done with whatever they're doing. All right, so the House of Delegates is finishing their work, the Senate is finishing their work, and then they do something called crossover. The House of Delegates sends their bills to the Senate sends their bills to the House of Delegates, and then they all vote again on what they're going to pass and how they're going to reconcile all this laws. Now, there's been like 800 bills on both sides, not just Second Amendment stuff, but 800 bills on both sides. Things happen super fast, right? So everything's now kind of getting ready to cross over, and we have a pretty good idea of what we're looking at from Second Amendment restrictions, and that's why I'm here, okay? That's what I'm here to talk to you about, is what are we looking at, what are the true implications of what things are. Now, as I said, Senate Bill 16 was withdrawn, but there is a bill on the House side called House Bill 961. Don't know if any of you all are paying attention to that one. But House Bill 961 is like Senate Bill 16, only it's worse. It's worse because it not only deals with semi-automatic rifles, which people call assault rifles, if you're Democrat, but it also affects magazines and pistols. Okay, so standard regular pistols that we all own, if you own a pistol, that would hold more than 10. You would be a felon to have that magazine. Okay, so that's the big part of 961, and that affects everybody. So it doesn't make the gun illegal. So if you have a Glock 17 and that Glock 17 holds 17 rounds in your magazine, you got to get rid of the magazine, not the gun. You got to replace that magazine and put a 10-round magazine in it to make it legal. Now that bill,
is 10 okay, or is it 10 or more?
it's 10. The magazine has to be 10. So that bill has not gotten out of committee. Now tomorrow is the last day, Friday, all right, is the last day for the House committee. From all of the people that I've talked to, it doesn't look good that bill is going to come out of committee. But we're going to know that tomorrow, okay? If that bill comes out of committee, then it's going to go to the House floor and they're going to vote on it, all right? If the House passes 961, then it's going to have to go over to the Senate, okay? Now, there are some Democrats in the Senate that have openly said that they're not going to support it. In the Senate, there are 21 senators to 19 senators, 21 Democrats to 19 Republicans, okay? There are at least 3 senators that have said they're not going to support it. So even if it makes it out of the House, it's not likely going to make it over past the Senate. So as much as I can predict as a gambling man, I don't think that you're going to see 961 see the light of day tomorrow because they know they're not going to pass it.
Are there any discussions about the benefits of having more than 10 rounds?
Well, I mean, obviously from the Second Amendment community, there's those conversations, but
I'm talking about what the Senate is.
Now, the senators are not, the senators that are opposed to it don't like it because it would make people felons to possess firearms that they've legally purchased in the past. It's not so much about the capacity issue as what the punishment issue is. So we're going to have, except as to 961, I'm going to tell you what's happening and what's going to happen. Now, you should keep an eye on what happens tomorrow with 961, and I'll update that further on Facebook if this really starts getting oxygen, but it does not look like it's going to. They're meeting on it first thing tomorrow morning. We're going to know for sure tomorrow what happens in the House. All right, here's what has passed. Universal background checks. Okay, they've passed both chambers. They still have to swap them between each other, but they've passed both chambers. That's with almost as 100% certainty as we can have, that's going to pass. What does that mean to anybody? Universal background checks basically say, well, first, let's talk about what a background check is. If you come to my gun shop and you buy a gun from me on the retail purchase as a new purchaser, you have to fill out some federal forms and some state forms, and we have to run your name through the Virginia State Police System, and the Virginia State Police System says yes or no, you can buy a gun. Okay? That's called the instant background check. You have to do that when you're purchasing from a gun shop. Okay? Now, what universal background checks affects, it doesn't affect that because that's already the law. What it affects is that if I have a gun and I want to sell it to you as a private party, right now we can do that transaction without any background check. So I can sell a gun, if I have a gun on me, I can sell you that gun right now for $300. You give me $300 and we're done. Okay? That's allowed. That's how the law is right now. So what universal background checks say is that between private parties now, you have to bring it into a gun shop and get the gun shop involved to do the background check. Okay? Now, as a gun shop owner, that really works out well for me because I get to get a little piece of that money, right? So the only person who really benefits out of this are the gun shops. But that's generally what universal background checks mean. So starting July 1, if you're going to sell a gun between two private parties, you'll have to involve a gun shop to do that. Generally, that's going to add probably about $30 to $40, depending upon the gun shop, to the transaction. Okay? Now, there's goods to this, and I'll just throw them out there. The one good thing that you'll have is you'll have a permanent paper record that you transferred your firearm to the gun shop, and then the gun shop did the background check and transferred it to the seller. So there's a permanent record there. That's a good thing for a seller. You don't have to keep some bill of sale forever. And the only other good thing that really would come out of it for you is that you would have the peace of mind that the person you're selling your gun to isn't a prohibited person. Okay? Universal background checks do not affect transfers between immediate family members. They do not affect if your uncle dies and you get his guns. It doesn't affect you as an heir. It doesn't affect immediate family member transfers. Okay? But it does affect it if you are selling the guns between your family. So if you're selling your cousin a gun, he'll have to he'll have to go through that universal background check. Sure.
What about if you buy a gun from a private and he bought it from somebody else? Who knows how many times down the line?
Yeah. Look, it's going to be a misdemeanor if you don't comply with the law. So all that's going to matter is what happens after July 1.
I'm talking about now. If you have, before this goes into
Sure.
law, how are the police going to know? They're going to trace it. It's going to come back to the original owner.
Well, yeah. So again, what's going to have to happen is that if that gun somehow gets involved in a crime down the road, they're going to have to track back where that gun went to as best as they can. It's going to be more problematic for first party sellers than it will be third, fourth, and fifth party sellers because a lot of people aren't keeping those records before the universal background check thing. All right, so that's universal background checks. The next one is red flag laws. Okay, so red flag laws are definitely going to pass, and here's what they're generally going to look like. People that, if somebody goes to a magistrate or a police officer and says that you're an extreme risk of danger to either yourself or someone else, then the police are allowed to come to your house with a search warrant and recover any firearms that they find in your house. and then you have to go see a judge in 2 weeks, and then the judge is going to decide if you should get your guns back or that you should be barred for a longer period of time. The maximum term is 6 months under both the bills. All right. So a couple of questions that I've been asked about red flag laws is, what if you have your guns in a storage unit in North Carolina? What if you have your guns in at your brother's house? Generally speaking, what they're going to do is they're going to come to your residence, and that's where they're going to search for whatever firearms that you have. All right, that's a valid search warrant, no differently than if they were, searching your house for some kind of a criminal activity. So you won't be able to resist that search. They'll be allowed to come in and recover your firearms. Okay. Now, this is a civil issue. This is not a criminal issue, so this isn't going to bar you from owning or possessing firearms down the road. It's not going to bar you from being able to purchase firearms down the road. This is just in a situation involving 6 months, up to 6 months of time, where a judge can restrict your ability to own firearms during that time period. All right? Well, yeah, so a lot of people say due process, and I guess I should address that. Red flag laws are all over the United States. In California and Colorado and New York and New Hampshire, I mean, they're all over the place. And there's never been a court that's found that these violate due process. And what they've done is they've leveled in something called an exigent circumstance into the law that says, because of the dangers of suicide or homicide, that this is an emergency and this falls under that emergency situation. All right. So when people say due process, basically what they're saying is before you're punished, generally in the law, you have the right to defend yourself, right? That's the due process. Before you receive your punishment, you get to go through the process. In this particular thing, you receive the punishment up front, and then the due process comes on the backside. But that is related only to a very short window of 2 weeks. Yep.
So if you have a rather nasty neighbor that just calls the police on you,
right,
they can still do that?
Right. Okay. So let's understand it just generally. That's a very good question, and I'm gonna dive right into what we're talking about here. So there's 2 ways currently, there will be 3 ways currently in July of dealing with somebody who's in a mental health distress situation. The first way is something called a temporary detention order. And the way that TDOs work is that if I'm concerned that you may want to kill yourself or there's some problem with you, I can go to the magistrate and get a temporary detention order against you. And what that will do is that will cause the police to come out and arrest your person. Okay, they come out and they put you in the back of the car in handcuffs and they take you to a mental hospital, okay? And they deposit you into a mental hospital and you're there for 3 days. The hospital then decides if you are in this condition. If you're not, they let you go. If they think you are, then you see a judge 3 days after you've been deposited into the mental hospital. Now during that time, obviously you don't have your firearms because you're in a mental hospital. The second way that you can go about doing it is that if you're aggressive towards me, that you may want to hurt me, I can get a protective order, okay? And the way a protective order is issued is without you having any say, I can go to a judge, get a protective order against you, and when you get served with that protective order, you will not legally be allowed to own or possess firearms during the time that protective order is in place. So that means you have to voluntarily get rid of your firearms. If you're caught with a firearm with a protective order in place, then that will be a crime. That'll be a violation, all right? And then the third way is going to be through red flags. All right, so here's the thing. The red flag laws are probably going to be the highest level of where abuse will occur. And the reason for that is this, is that if I love you and I care about you so much that I'm gonna go to the magistrate and do something about that. If I have these 3 options available, right? If I red flag you and the police come and the basis for that is because you're suicidal, and the police come out and they take your guns, they then leave. That doesn't take away your suicidal ideations, okay? I mean, it's as if there's no other way to kill yourself other than with a firearm. So if I love you and I care about you, then I'm going to TDO you, okay, I'm going to put you into a mental hospital for immediate evaluation if I'm going to do anything. If I don't love you and you're kind of a jerk and you keep putting your trash can right behind my driveway on Wednesday mornings, I may be more inclined to go get a red flag law, right? Because I just want to mess with you, right?
You have to swear?
You do have to swear facts and circumstances out, and there is a provision under Virginia law that already exists that if somebody makes a false allegation against you, there's a process of you being able to sue them. Well, that's a reasonable point. You know, if I could say any of you told me you were going to kill yourself, and it would be your word versus my word, right? And so, you know, what we would, you know, if you were going to red flag somebody, I would want to have more than just words. I would hopefully want to have a Facebook post that says, you know, this is my last post, you're never going to see me again, you know, something like that.
You find out who put the claim in.
Yeah, oh yeah. You get your due process. It's just, you know, on the backside.
Can you do it anonymously? Or
No.
Will they know that, well, like, if I put one against you, are you gonna know it was me?
Yes.
That's what it should be.
Yes, I will know, and I'll be able to see exactly what you wrote. So the problem with red flags laws is going to be if you make somebody mad enough and they do that and they abuse it, you're going to lose your guns for 2 weeks, okay? And then when you get to a judge, hopefully a reasonable judge sees what's happening and dismisses that, okay? All right. So that's red flags. Yep, go ahead.
So when the police come with a search warrant for your home for these weapons, if they find anything else
Sure.
other than the weapons,
Right.
that opens up a whole Pandora's box.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
there was no evidence presented before this search was authorized on a warrant, right? There's no burden of proof on the people making the claim?
That's right. So an example that was used on the Senate floor is if, you know, if a false red flag law comes out, or false red flag warrant comes out, police come to your house, and inside your house is a AR-15, which would have been a prohibited weapon when they were talking about this. You know, now you're getting lit up for being a felon for having this AR-15. So yeah, that's very, very valid, but that's how the law works, okay? If the police come to your house with a search warrant and they're looking for something and they find something else, even if they didn't find the something they were looking for, then they can charge you with that.
I'm not an attorney, but in the other instances, they have to have a burden of proof and some kind of evidence.
Well, they have to present, in a normal search warrant, like if I think you have cocaine in your house, okay, and I'm a police officer, I have to go to a magistrate and I have to tell the magistrate why I think you have cocaine in your house, okay? It could be because John over here said I saw cocaine in your house, and that might be all I have is this informant who says there's cocaine in the house. That may or may not be true. Same thing with the red flag law. With the red flag law, you got to go to the magistrate and you got to tell the magistrate what your proof is, and then the magistrate is the gatekeeper to decide if that's enough. All right. Again, it's just the word and the validity of what the evidence is. All right. Yep.
How's it about with firearms from spouses, from roommates? Is
Sure.
it per household or?
They will seize everything in the household. Everything that's in the household.
So other people's legal weapons are going to be seized?
Well, right, because in Virginia, we do not have a firearm registry, all right? So there's no registry in Virginia, so there's no way to know, the police will have no way to know if they find a Glock pistol in the drawer, who that pistol belongs to, all right? They're not going to be able to do that. So they'll seize everything, and then the owners, if they can prove ownership, that's not this guy or this woman, can then go to the police department and recover their firearms after they've satisfied the police
Prove ownership.
Prove ownership, yeah. Yep, go ahead.
If they come to your door, suppose they come to your door and ask if you have weapons in the house or at another property, do you have the right to not speak and not?
Absolutely, and you don't have to tell them where anything is. You can just keep your mouth shut. And you know, that's a really good piece of advice anyway. If you ever are served with a search warrant, shut your mouth. You know, there's really, you know, there's no point of making it worse. So yes, that's right. Go ahead.
These laws are anti-constitutional. Can not sue in court to get a rebuild?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Let me answer that in just a second. Go ahead.
there any way of getting misdemeanor or felonies or criminal charges for people who sit there and file this because we don't like MAGA or we don't like Obama or whatever? Is there any way of getting much stronger penalties for false?
Well, not in the bills that they've proposed, but under the current existing law, there's something called abuse of process. So if I take a civil action out against you, and that's a false action, like a protective order, then the person, the respondent who had to go through all that can sue that person. And you can sue that person for the attorney's fees, like if you lost your job, if you lost, whatever your damages are, you can sue that person. There is a crime in Virginia of filing a false report. That would be up to the police. They would have to prosecute that. So, I mean, if I literally 100% falsely took a charge out and they could absolutely prove that, then I suppose the police could take a criminal charge out if they wanted to do that. That already exists. No different if I said you came over and stole my car, and you didn't. That they could take a criminal charge out against me for that.
Second question. In reality, do we think the cops are really going to want to put up with, back and forth, a lot of back and forth? We don't like, people abuse it, we don't like this, and they just say, we don't have the time.
Yeah, I think that the police are very disgruntled with the concept that they're going to have to enforce these laws. So I think that what you're probably going to see is they have to do what they have to do, but I don't think that they're going to be looking for extra trouble. They may go out and do a cursory sweep and then get out of there, especially because this is a civil warrant. So let me talk about the constitutionality question, because that's an important question. Despite what people think on Facebook, the way our government works is this, is that the General Assembly or the Congress passes laws, and then the courts determine whether those laws are constitutional, all right? Now, I know many of you will say, well, the Second Amendment says shall not infringe. Currently, right now, we have 20,000 gun laws in the United States, all right? 20,000 nationwide. So there's plenty of infringement going on, and all of those laws have been determined to be constitutional. It wasn't until 12 years ago in the Heller case that the Supreme Court of the United States actually ruled we could own firearms for personal protection. It wasn't until 12 years ago that that happened, all right? Before 12 years ago, it was not a settled issue in the law that you could have a pistol for home defense. It wasn't a settled piece of law that you could own a shotgun for self-defense, all right? 12 years ago, the government was arguing that the only people that could own guns were people in a militia, okay? 12 years ago. Justice Stevens, brilliant judge, went along with that, okay? So this was not until 12 years ago that this was settled, but 12 years ago in the Heller case, Justice Scalia said that the Second Amendment is not unlimited, okay? It is not unlimited. There are limitations, and so when we're talking about infringing, which is what this is, the courts have found that the state has a compelling interest to protect life and liberty, even your own life. So with a situation like a red flag, the preface of red flags are to protect people who are suicidal. I mean, that's the primary issue. And so the state has a duty to protect you if they can, and that's how they've carved this exception. Now, just because I'm explaining it doesn't mean I agree with it, okay? So understand that. I'm simply just trying to help you understand that laws are defined constitutional by the courts, and so far, everything that they've done have been litigated in other states and other courts, and all of the federal courts have found that they are valid. All right.
What if they come upon a hardcore who doesn't agree with it either, and they came to get his gun?
Well, they can take him down. You can be arrested for resisting the search. Sure. Yeah, you'll be shot probably. Go ahead.
How is this going to work against our current tax structure? Because you're going to have to gather the guns, you're going to have to log them, you're going to have to keep a record, then you're going to have to house the guns, then you're going to have to go before a court, which takes another set, which we already don't have enough judges as it is. So my question is, where's all this money coming from for this one law?
Well, it's magic.
No, it's not.
Don't you know that? It's magic because the criminal justice system never runs out of money. Only schools run out of money. Just schools. Schools are the only people that run out of money. Everybody else, there's always unlimited resources.
But I've seen nothing online, anywhere, showing us where we're going to, as citizens,
Right.
be able to put more money into the pot to be able to do this. And also, what happens if that gun is all of a sudden missing from the chamber where they had it for 14 days?
Well, then there's a remedy for that. If the police misplaced evidence, you can deal with that. Look, here's the thing about laws is that we live in a society where DUI is illegal. Okay. But that doesn't mean that every single person who drinks and drives gets arrested. Okay, that's just how it is. There's only so many police, and there's only so many judges, and there's only so many prosecutors. And what happens in the criminal justice system is they take the resources and they apply them. So yes, if there are 2 police officers that have to go exercise a red flag law, then there's going to be people DUIing more on the streets. They're not going to get caught. That's just how laws work, right? And so as they pile more and more laws, the localities use their resources to enforce as much as they possibly can. But people, not everybody is going to get prosecuted. Not everybody's going to get, dealt with. So I know lots of questions, right? All right, go ahead.
Isn't there any provision in the Virginia Constitution that would be just as useful or maybe even better?
Yeah,
than
the Second Amendment.
Rather than the Second Amendment, why can't this go to Virginia?
So who knows Amanda Chase? I know Amanda Chase too. So that is a big thing that I'm talking to her about a lot. So the Second Amendment sucks. All right, it sucks. It's been hollowed out by the federal courts time and time and time again. If in Maryland, they argued that the Maryland assault weapons ban was unconstitutional. It went before the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, and the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals said it is constitutional. Okay, that means that if or House Bill 961 passes and says assault weapons are illegal, I'm calling them assault weapons because they're calling them assault weapons, but they say they're illegal, then I can't go to court and say, hey, they're unconstitutional, because the courts have already created this terrible law. So what happened is that, Alexander Hamilton and James Madison and Ben Franklin, these guys were in their late 20s when they wrote this document, okay? They were kids, and they were trying to be fancy with their commas and all of that in how they wrote the Second Amendment. That's why it reads so funky weird. They were trying to be fancy in how they wrote. And even if you try to read the Federalist Papers where Alexander Hamilton tried to say what he meant, it makes it even worse. So if we can stop talking about the Second Amendment and talk about Article 1, Section 13 of the Virginia Constitution, it's actually never been litigated in Virginia. It's never been challenged. It's never been used. It's brand new. Okay, so there is a possibility that if right lawyers use that constitutional section correctly, that we may be able to get a little bit more traction in Virginia courts. The problem is that federal judges are judges for life. So once you become a federal judge, you're not beholden to anybody for anything. But Virginia judges are reappointed every 6 to 8 to 10 years, depending upon which court level that they sit at. All right. So if you have a Democrat-controlled General Assembly, who they're the ones who pick judges, and you get assigned to a judge that is at the end of his term and he wants his job back, he's going to be inherently biased to follow maybe more of what the Democrats would want. And so it's kind of this ebb and flow where we would like to argue Article 1, Section 13, but the negative of that is we're going to be dealing with partisan judges. All right? So there's a lot to think about. All right? Let me move on because there's still so much more to talk about. Go ahead, last question.
I don't know. So my question is, the police come, they tear my house up, they damage things in this search. What rights, how do I recover those damages? How does that get taken?
Well, that shouldn't happen unless you obstruct them, okay? But if they knock on your door and if you step back and they walk in and they go through your underwear drawer and look for stuff, and then they push it back, and they shouldn't tear things up. And if they did in that situation, you would have a claim against the police department. If you barricaded your door and said, hell no, I'm not opening this door, and they have to kick your door down, then you're responsible for those damages, all right? If the police have to gain entry and they have a warrant and you refuse that, then you're responsible for the damages that they caused to make entry. That doesn't mean they can come in and tear your house up, but at least the front door that they have to kick in, that would be your responsibility in that scenario. Now look, this is in a situation when they have a valid warrant from a magistrate, all right? So cooperating is going to be the only thing, because they're going to get in one way or the other, all right? Okay, let's move on to the next couple things. And this is, if you've been involved in the Second Amendment sanctuary movement, I will tell you that this gentleman here in the front row who just asked this question, he said something at one of the meetings and called out one of the Virginia Beach council members and said, have you even read the bill that they're talking about doing? Because it's outrageous, and here's what we're going to talk about. The General Assembly passed, at least the Senate passed an ability for localities to make their own gun laws. And it allows localities to decide whether they're going to let guns in parks, whether they're going to let guns, like if you have a permitted event, whether they're going to allow guns on adjoining streets, whether they're going to be able to allow firearms in public buildings. And so the problem with that bill, and that's passed, and that's likely going to become law, is that it will then be up to us to go straight to, as soon as that bill passes, as soon as the governor signs it, it is round 2 of the sanctuary city movement across the state, where we will have to push our localities for a resolution or even an ordinance that they're not going to do that. All right, because I don't know if you know how city council works, but very rarely do we have any idea what they're doing, because it's pretty quick, I mean, unless you're looking at the right time and the right place. But we're going to have to do this all over again, where we're going to have to get our board of supervisors and our city council members to say, all right, we have this power, but we as an ordinance are not going to exercise that power. And so that's something that is absolutely going to have to be put on. Or otherwise what you're going to have is you're going to have a situation where you're driving from Virginia Beach and you're going to Chesapeake, and now all of a sudden you can't have a gun in the DMV there, but you can have a gun in the DMV in Virginia Beach, and now you're charged with a crime because you have your pistol and your, a concealed carry firearm in a governmental building. It's outrageous. Okay, so we can't let the localities make those rules. There's already enough gun laws in Virginia that are hard enough to keep up with. Now we're going to have, in the 7 cities of Hampton Roads, you're going to have all these localities that are going to literally have different rules and regulations. Maybe you can have it in some parks, maybe you can't have it in other parks. I mean, it's just really impossible to know. And the only way to protect ourselves from that is we're going to have to go back to the localities and do this all over again. So put that on your calendar for April, May, and June. We're going to have to do this all over again, and there's going to have to be lots of organization like we've done it before. Okay. Yep. Go ahead.
Will there be lawsuits of people who have left their guns knowing they can't go in a government building, and something happens to them between where they had their gun and where they? Yeah. So Senator DeSteph and a couple of others proposed a waiver of sovereign immunity to the Commonwealth in the event somebody gets hurt in a gun-free zone. That got killed pretty quickly by the Democrat-controlled Justice Committee. So yeah, that's not as vulnerable as individuals.
Well, I mean, yes. If you are, the reality is if you go into Building 2 and you're now not allowed to have a gun in Building 2 because of a city ordinance that the legislatures let them have, and you get shot in Building 2, you're not going to be able to sue Virginia Beach or the Commonwealth for that. They have sovereign immunity. Go ahead.
And that would include the individual too, right?
Right.
Because
Well, I mean, you could sue the shooter, sure, the guy who's shooting.
The legislator.
Right. Yeah. No. Okay.
All right, now look, there's a couple of other little bills. I'm just going to go through them pretty quickly. There's going to be a 1 gun a month rule, 1 pistol per month rule, but that's going to be bypassable with a concealed carry permit. All right. There's going to be some reciprocity problems with your concealed carry permit. That is why I teach the Utah concealed carry class. And the reason that people are taking that class is Utah gives you 37 states of reciprocity. So if you care about your concealed carry permit working in other places, you need to go somewhere that teaches the Utah concealed carry class so that you can have a permit that works. If all you care about is Virginia and North Carolina, you don't need it. Okay, your Virginia permit's going to be just fine. But if you want to be able to carry into other places, those other places are going to be more and more difficult as the law kicks in and the Attorney General starts revoking the reciprocity agreements. Yep.
You have more than one permit from different...
Yeah. You get a Virginia permit and then you get a non-resident Utah permit. So that's why, if you've been wondering about the Utah thing, that's why it's being talked about. I went and became a Utah instructor 3 years ago when they did this last time, and there was this big push, and so I'm not saying you have to do it with me, there's lots of us, but that's why this whole Utah thing is coming out, because people want the reciprocity, but you don't need to do it if you don't care about having a gun anywhere other than Virginia, okay? If you just want to have it in Virginia, your Virginia permit's going to be just fine, all right? If you just want to go to North Carolina, it's going to be just fine, but if you want to start going further out, that's going to be something you're going to want to think about. All right, the last and not least one, there's a bill that passed by the day today in the Senate. It's going to pop back up tomorrow. If any of you know anybody who has children in daycares, they're trying to make firearms illegal in daycares, private daycares, which is kind of silly. It would seem as though that parents should be able to decide if they want to do business with the daycare based upon their business policies. But that's coming up tomorrow, so that's the only other little thing. All right, let's talk about, if I can have just a couple more minutes and tell you about the recall thing with Senator Amanda Chase, because I know a lot of you are probably interested in that. Okay, so I can't really tell you what that's about just yet because we're still working on it, but it's good. It's very good. And it's very possibly going to get some very good traction. Just give me a little bit of time. Today we just got 600 pages of documents from the Virginia State Police that we FOIA'd. We're going through we're going to make this one right. It'll probably roll out, I suspect, we're going to roll it out sometime at the end of session, right around March, right around St. Patrick's Day. And if you're signing petitions, great. Online petitions are worthless. Don't share them, don't sign them. They don't mean anything. They have to be real petitions where you sign your name in ink like you're doing the ballot access forms. But when Amanda, or Senator Chase, puts her petition out there, it's going to be one you're going to really want to pay attention to. All right. If you thought that I should say, the Democrats thought that they had something good with the Ukrainians. We actually have something good that would have worked. So that's to come. All right, but I'm telling you, she is hell bent on making this happen, and we're gonna make that work. All right, that's all I can give you. That's valid. I don't know how much time left I have, but I'll keep asking questions until somebody pulls me off the stage. How about that?
What time is it?
7:45?
Okay, you've got like
19, 48.
15 more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
What about if we get Northam recalled, does Justin Fairfax take
Yeah.
over for him?
Yeah.
He's almost worse than...
Nope, he's much better. And look, here's the deal. Here's the deal about things. Justin Fairfax still has a political future. Northam doesn't. Okay, so Northam has nothing to lose. And so Northam's much more aggressive. If we had Fairfax is actually a very decent human being, even though he's a Democrat, he's a very decent human being. Even if it doesn't change anything, what it'll do is it will shake the entire political landscape of Virginia, okay? And just the threat of Saslaw being recalled caused him to withdraw that. So if we actually start getting 350,000 signatures on a petition that alleges the things that we're going to allege, it will change the dynamics.
Physically signed.
Physically signed.
Where are they?
There's not ready yet. Not ready yet. Not ready yet. Go ahead.
What is about needing 25% of?
That didn't make it. They tried to change the rules that died. Go ahead.
So how do we most effectively make this change when we want them to not vote against this tomorrow? What do we say to our legislators when we?
I don't think I would, my Engage Your Government page, if you're part of it, I've been talking about writing and so forth. There's 5 senators that are worth writing to now. That's it, okay? So Cree Deeds, he ran for governor, okay? Cree Deeds is a good one. Edwards, Linwood Lewis, Morrissey. I know you may not like Morrissey. He's the sex offender, but he's really not a sex offender. He just had, he married her and they've had this beautiful family. I mean, he is a sex offender, but he's not a creepy sex offender, okay? Right?
It's not like mine.
Right. So
You can use my mallet there.
yeah, right. No, that's fine. So actually those are really the 4. Those are the ones you want to write to. Now remember, we only have to have 2 to flip it, and 3 to make sure that Fairfax doesn't override the tie-breaking vote. So those are the ones you want to be writing to, but just wait until 961 passes before you do that, because right now they are at the point where they're not going to go any further. Go ahead.
Do you teach the Utah concealed carry class here in Virginia Beach?
I do. Yeah.
Your shop?
At my shop, yeah, and it's super busy. I mean, people are. It's so we charge. I don't really mean to. Sorry. It's $75.
Okay, that's reasonable.
Go ahead.
Can the police decide if they have limited resources? Can they decide which laws they
Sure,
feel like
they have to do that. They have to do that anyway. They have to do that. I mean, if you've ever called the cops because somebody vandalized your car and it takes them 4 hours to get out there, that's what happens, right? I mean, they're busy. So they're going to prioritize, and get to things when they can get to things. Go ahead in the back.
I don't own a gun, so excuse my ignorance on this. I want to talk about the background checks, universal background checks.
Uh-huh.
If I want to sell you a gun, you as a person, not
Right.
your shop, and there's no registration in Virginia, so how does anyone know that I had the gun and you now have the gun and I have your money?
Right. Well, that's, the enforcement of that law is going to be questionable. All right. But the answer to that is generally this. It goes to the first purchaser. When you buy a gun from a gun shop, there's a serial number on that gun, and every gun is test fired by the manufacturer. And they take a bullet out, and there's marks that are on the inside of the barrel, and it ballistically scars that bullet. And they put that into an FBI database. And so down the road, when this gun gets used in a homicide and they peel the bullet out of the guy and they say, okay, let's figure out what this gun is, they send it to the FBI, they trace it back to the manufacturer. The manufacturer says we sold it to Defensive Tactics Gun Shop. The police come to my shop, they get the record, and then they go to the first purchaser and find out where the gun is. The first purchaser then says, this is what I've done with it, and that may be a cold case at that point. Or they may say, hey, I sold it to you, and then the police come to your house and they ask you where the gun is. And
I sold it to somebody.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't remember who. It was years ago.
Right. I know you've asked, Adriana.
Back to the background check. Logic and reason and fairness doesn't come into play here, so I hope you understand why I'm questioning this. The background check, there are so few exceptions. You can't even lend a gun to someone to use. So I don't see any exception for giving your gun to a gunsmith for maintenance and repair. And I don't trust them to say that that's okay if it's not in writing. I don't want it passed, but if it has to pass, it does need to have an exception in there so we can have our rights maintained. How do we go about, every legislator that I mentioned this to said, oh, I didn't think of that, and hasn't told me who to call to try and get it addressed.
Well, I mean, any senator or delegate can reconcile that bill. And let me say this before I answer any more questions. Let me say this. So 80% of all gun crimes are caused by people that have illegally purchased their firearms, okay? 80%. So when you start talking about the real numbers, 1,000 people a year die because of some type of a firearm-related incident. 65% of those are suicides, all right? So you have 350 people that are homicidally killed by somebody with a firearm. 80% of those people
have illegally already bought their firearms. So every law that they've imposed, they're going to impose on us, is not going to affect the 80%, okay? Because a criminal doesn't go to a school to shoot the school up and say, oh wait, there's no guns allowed in this school, I can't do this, right? All right, so you're talking about the 20% of the people. So in Virginia, 20% of 350 is 70 people that legally bought their guns and have misused them in a homicidal way. So these laws are going to affect possibly up to 70 different people in Virginia out of a state of 8.5 million. If you have a phone, divide 70 by 8.5 million and see what your percentage is, okay? It's pretty low. So you're not going to see anything. And rifles, 6 people. 6 total have been killed by a rifle in Virginia in 2017, which is the last number we had, 6. So when you're talking about making AR-15s illegal and all that, we're talking about 6 total. We don't even know if they're AR-15s, it just is a rifle, all right? Who has not asked a question? Raise your hand if you haven't asked a question. All right, go ahead.
The difference between them, you said the red flag laws, they go before a magistrate or they have to go before a judge, because there's a big difference in a magistrate and a judge.
Well, magistrates are 24 hours, so they do it first, okay? And then when it comes time, 2 weeks later when you go to court, you're in front of a real judge.
Because that scares me. A guy that I used to work with, his wife was a magistrate in the city of Franklin. She went to Pawnee camp for 2 weeks. I mean, how is somebody they're going to...
They're the gatekeepers. They're the same people that issue the search warrants. Vicki,
That's scary.
go ahead.
Tim, would you be willing to share just briefly your plan for safe schools?
Oh, yeah. So, I have a safe school plan. Met with them today. That's pretty exciting. So, in Virginia Beach, there are 90 campuses of schools. There are 27 police officers that guard 90 campuses of 70,000 students. Okay? That's it. So if we have an incident, if we have a Parkland incident in Virginia, we are in big trouble, okay? Even if it happens at a school where there's an SRO, a school resource officer. So I've been talking to the school board and I've proposed a pitch to Virginia Beach of how we could possibly arm some of the critical response teams in the schools by putting them through a sheriff's academy. Sheriff's academy, the sheriff is on board with doing the academy, the school board, okay, no offense to Vicki and Laura, because they're not, but they are not. And the reason for that is there's not enough outrage that there's only 27 police officers guarding 90 campuses and 70,000 students.
840 police officers in the city of Virginia Beach.
Well, there's 840 police officers, but actually police officers at the school.
3 shifts.
Well, that may be true. That's true. I get what you're saying. So my idea is that if we arm about 10 people in each school, making them through Sheriff's Academy, deputies, it would make that number go from 27 to 1,200. And so what I would like, if anybody would like to help me with this, is start having the conversation, is 27 enough? Okay, that's the conversation to have. And I don't know that my plan's the best plan. It may not be. It probably isn't. But the idea is 27 enough to guard 70,000 students? Parkland happened in 7 minutes. Over and done with, 7 minutes. So until we're really ready to have a real conversation, when people say they want reasonable gun reform, what they're saying is they don't want to see Parkland happen ever again. And the only way Parkland's not going to happen again is if you have response shooters embedded in the schools to be able to respond back if something happens. So that's my thing. I'll tell you what, Vicki and Laura, huge allies. Weems, huge ally. The rest, lukewarm, and some very, very cold to the idea. So who hasn't asked a question before I get kicked out of here? Go ahead.
About your school safety, I already proposed to Newport News and Norfolk special conservators, which is private security companies, sworn-in officers, police officers,
right,
and charge a lot less than having a police officer.
Yeah, the problem with the special conservator issue is that happened in Lee County, and the Attorney General went ape baloney over it. And they changed the law to where special conservators of the peace no longer can carry firearms. So the Richmond legislature 2 years ago changed the rules.
Well,
so
I'm a special conservator, I carry.
Yeah, but you can't carry in a school.
No, unless you become an SSO.
A school safety officer, but the problem with the way the rule is that the only way to be an SSO, school safety officer, is you have to be retired police. That's the way that statute reads. So there's this gap. So they basically made it to where you can have a gun, you can carry a gun, you can be appointed by the circuit court, that's great, but you can't go into a school with it. Only law enforcement can. So it's a problem. Who hasn't asked a question?
Then second, about that
Sure.
same thing, when you try to ask the police officer, the sheriff or the police chief to do a academy for special conservators, they decline.
Right.
And that's in every city.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, because they don't like them.
And chiefs are very.
Anybody else?
Well, just one comment
Sure.
on what you said earlier about, look at Israel. They've got some pretty bad guys over there. When's the last time you heard a shooting in one of those schools?
Well, in Florida, in Florida, they created the Guardian program, and there's billboards all over Florida that says never again. It takes Parkland before people are going to really want to do something, and that's tragic because the Guardian program, teachers carry guns in schools in Florida, and no kids are getting shot by the teachers. And so, it's a false narrative. It's a false narrative that teachers are dangerous with guns. It's a false narrative. All right, anybody else before I go? Go ahead.
Just one question. The thing that you proposed with the sheriff's training for the schools, have you thought about proposing that for the employees of Building 2?
Well, yeah, so Vince Smith and me are talking about that. Did you have a question? I know you raised your hand, the camera guy here. You're good? Okay. All right, guys. It was nice seeing you.